De jure segregation, or segregation mandated by law, was upheld in 1896 when the United States Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal facilities for whites and blacks were constitutional in a landmark case known as Plessy v. Ferguson. The legal precedent established by this case formed the foundation of segregation until it was overturned in 1954 by Brown v. Board of Education. The verdict of Brown v. Board of Education declared that separate facilities for whites and blacks were inherently unequal and therefore unconstitutional. This ruling, combined with the eventual passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, effectively ended legal segregation in the United States. Despite the elimination of legally enforced segregation, segregation in practice, or de facto segregation, remained widespread throughout the country. This harsh reality is especially evident in the residential sphere. In the contemporary United States, the degree to which de facto residential segregation is present varies by region. I wanted to discover how de facto residential segregation trends present in the South compare to those in the country's other regions. The South consists of South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee, or the 11 states that seceded from the Union during the Civil War. Research has led me to the conclusion that the African American population in the present-day southern United States is, as a whole, less segregated than that of the rest of the country, despite the region's history of intense racial discrimination. Residential segregation has been an issue of concern in the United States since the culmination of the Civil Rights Movement. The U.S. Census Bureau uses a number of measures to evaluate residential segregation. The most widely used measure, and the one that I will focus on, is called dissimilarity. Dissimilarity measures how evenly populations of different races are distributed in neighborhoods within a metropolitan area. A city's dissimilarity is represented by a number that can range from 0 to 1. A city with a dissimilarity index of 0 is completely integrated, while a city with a dissimilarity index of 1 is completely segregated. The number represents the percentage of a racist population that would have to change residences in order for each neighborhood to have the same percentage of that race as the metropolitan area as a whole. From 1980 to 2000, the U.S. Census Bureau compiled dissimilarity statistics for each of the country's 220 metropolitan areas with a black population exceeding 20,000. The data from this 20-year period revealed a clear decline in residential segregation throughout the United States. This graphic illustrates the trend as the distribution of dissimilarity indices for 2000, represented by the purple line, is noticeably lower on the spectrum than that of 1980, represented by the green line. The average dissimilarity index of the 220 metropolitan areas examined dropped from 0.73 in 1980 to 0.645 in 2000, an average decrease of 0.085. While housing in the United States as a whole is slowly becoming less segregated, a deeper examination of census data shows that the South is increasingly making more substantial gains in residential integration than the rest of the nation. As of 2000, the South was the second most integrated region of the country in terms of average metropolitan dissimilarity, only slightly more segregated than the West. Further statistics foreshadow the South overtaking the West as the country's most integrated region in the future. Of the 10 most integrated metropolitan areas in the U.S. by 2000, 8 were in the South. More indicative of the South's progress is the fact that all 10 of the country's metropolitan areas that showed the greatest decrease in segregation between 1980 and 2000 were located in the South. The top 5, consisting of Melbourne, Titusville, Palm Bay, Daytona Beach, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and Sarasota, Bradenton, were all located in Florida. More recent data establishes the South as the country's current leader in residential integration. In 2010, the Population Studies Center at the University of Michigan conducted a study that compared each state's dissimilarity index in 2000 with its average dissimilarity index between 2005 and 2009. The study revealed that 10 of the 11 southern states had experienced a decrease in residential segregation between 2000 and 2009, and that the other state, South Carolina, had experienced no change. This was not the case in the West, as states such as Utah, Washington, Oregon, Arizona, and New Mexico have become more segregated. The major reason for increased residential integration in the South is the region's rapid growth. As evidenced by this chart, cities with high rates of population growth tend to be more integrated than cities with stagnant growth rates. New South cities do not have traditional segregated residential patterns like those present in the older cities of the industrial Midwest and Northeast. These fast-developing southern cities are also attracting an increasingly mobile black middle class. Additionally, the negative attention that the South received during the civil rights movement prompted strict enforcement of integration policies in the region by the federal government. Despite a history marred with racial conflict, the southern region of the United States has emerged as the nation's leader in combating the problem of de facto residential segregation.